My father and mother came up here for sort of a belated honeymoon back in 27, and while they were in the area, they were so impressed with the scenery, of course. My father wanted to visit his old scoutmaster who had started a camp at Chimney Rock. And he went over to see Mr. Combs and loved the camp and the whole idea of camping. And he said, say, I have a piece of property over in southwestern Henderson County. Why don't you go take a look at it? And Dad and Mother came over and met a man, an athletic director from Spartanburg, South Carolina, Red Dobson, who was a highly esteemed coach at Spartanburg High School. And he and my father worked out a deal so that my father bought the property, and Mr. Dobson became the athletic director, and my father was the business manager, which was his field, really, and they started the camp.
For as long as I can remember, every summer was spent at Camp Pinnacle. It helps that my dad was a university professor, because it meant he had the summers off. So my mom would pack up 4 kids, the dog, and we would spend the summer here before going back to northern Indiana. I taught for decades, and one of my students was a camper and a counselor here, and we stay in touch. So it's funny, but when you meet people and somebody says, oh, I went to camp in North Carolina, then you say, well, have you ever? And it's amazing how many people go, no, I didn't, but my cousin did. And, it's fun to have those connections.
My mother was a camper here, and so she was the one who said, this is what you're going to do in the summertime. So, and that was great by me. I started as a camper in 1970, and I was a camper for 4 summers, and then I was a CIT, which in those days was a counselor in training, as a 15 or 16-year-old, and then I was a counselor, and then through college and high school and college, I worked here during the summer times.
I was an awkward child growing up and didn't have very close friendships at school. My family moved around a lot, and so my favorite part of coming to camp was that I was accepted for being the weirdo person that I was. And I made probably my most genuine friendships at camp. While I did a terrible job of keeping up with them throughout the years, I would say that they were the closest friends that I had ever made.
Word got around that we were looking for a camp director, someone who could take over, because we were all getting rather elderly and needed young management. And John Dockendorf came, and we interviewed him and came to an agreement then that he would take over running. We would still own the property.
So I remember Labor Day Monday, when our lease began in 2011. It was pouring rain. I was watching mud just run off the camp, looking at a lot of buildings that hadn't been maintained in 4 or 5 years, and going, where do we begin and how do we pay for this? And then walking down to the edge of camp, looking through the rain at this beautiful lake and this beautiful setting, and going, how can you not succeed with this magical place?
being as old as we are, we do miss some of the things that used to be. But that's our problem, not John's. So we're really very pleased with the way things have gone.
Camp used to be single gender, now it's co-ed. We used to have a lot of awards, so at the end of every summer you would have an award. Boys camp used to do the Dobson camper, which was like a big deal. We don't do awards anymore like that. We used to have horseback, we don't have horseback riding anymore. I would say those are the biggest changes that alumni maybe struggled with at first when camp was reopened, but I've come to really love and embrace. It is no longer the same place that I initially attended. The facility looks different, the people are different, but the underlying mission of what they're trying to do for kids is still the same. And that's what made me fall in love with camp to begin with, was how camp made me feel. And to be able, I'm gonna cry, but to be able to do that for kids, I think is so important. It's hard being a kid. And if we can make it a little bit easier just by a couple weeks at summer camp, why would I not do that?
I think it's people, it's this place. Just what's behind me is just the most amazing sight that you could ever imagine. And going to bed at night, you can feel that you're surrounded by other people with a common purpose, a common excitement about what they're doing. It's a pretty magical place, this property for me, and has such an unbelievable history of going back to, to the 1920s, and the kids and people who have been coming here for all that time. It's pretty amazing.
Just the fun and the friendships over the years, and just being with people that just seem to enjoy life.
Pinnacle, here I come. We hike so free, and it's just so great to see.